Welcome to Verse by Verse with Dr. Mike Halsey as we are engaged in a study of that fascinating book in the Old Testament, the book of Esther. Our text today is in chapter 3, and we are going to begin reading then at verse 7. In the first month, which is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of Xerxes the king, Pur, that is the lot, was cast before Haman from day to day and from month to month, until the 12th month, that is the month Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples of all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those. Their laws are different from other people, and they do not observe the king's laws. So it is not in the king's interest to let them remain. If it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business, to put into the king's treasuries." The date of this event is late March or early April in the year of 474 BC. Now the question is not, will Haman move against the Jews? The question at this point is, when will he move against the Jews? And this is where the superstitions of the ancient Persians come into play. Like other ancient societies, superstition was rife. It was all over the place. The Romans, later than the Persian Empire, would become superstitious or be superstitious and decide things by chance and curses and so forth and so on. They will make no major decisions, these Persians. They will make no major decisions without casting the pur, or the poor as it is pronounced. And that lot will tell them the lucky day and the lucky month to proceed against the Jews. Now, how did they go about this? They went about it using dice. They went about it using sometimes paper or papyrus or chips of wood. There are various means. The ancient societies, particularly the rulers, had their cadre of soothsayers. And these soothsayers would cast the lot, and then, say for example, Haman, he would observe this, or he would cast the lot, and they would be observing him and interpreting the meaning of the cast lot. Herodotus, to whom we've often referred, the ancient father of history, talked about how superstitious the Persians were. And this fits right in with what we're reading now in the book of Esther. Xenophon, another author, talked about the Persians and their various superstitions, curses, and all kinds of different incantations that they would use. Now, the way they looked at it, it's always good to put ourselves in their tunics and so forth, and to ask, how did these ancient people look at this practice of casting the lot? They looked at it as a committing of the event to the gods. And as they cast the lot, the gods would decide. Now, they are certainly in error, but according to the book of Proverbs, we find in chapter 16, verse 33, these particular words. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. So as Haman casts the lot, he doesn't know it, but God is behind this casting. And we'll see how that works out as we go through this particular text. I want you to notice, and we'll come back to this, notice the very careful recording by the narrator, the writer of the book of Esther, that he says this went on day by day, by day by day, month by month, month by month, and so forth. In other words, casting the lot on to find of the, let's say using our calendar, the lucky month, and then you have to go through finding the lucky day. So you have to go through casting the lot concerning every month and casting the lot concerning every day of the year. Now we're going to get back to that and see that that is indeed an important notation. Now, as we continue to go through this, we might think, well, that's them. That's back in the ancient world. We don't do that anymore. Oh, really? On March 30th, 1981, President Ronald Reagan was the victim of an attempted assassination. He survived. But his wife, Nancy, after that, started thinking. And she thought of those presidents that had been assassinated. She thought of McKinley, Garfield, Lincoln, Kennedy. And she began to worry. And I mean worry on steroids. She prayed. She lost weight. She consulted with friends. This was all consuming. When President Reagan left to make a speech somewhere, she cried. When he was at home, even, she cried. She was so worried about Ronnie, as she called him, her husband. And then one day she gets a call, and that call is from Merv Griffin. Merv Griffin tells her about a San Francisco lady named Joan. Joan is an astrologist. And he said, you know, you might consult her to find a solution to your worry and your problems. So a telephonic meeting was arranged between the two. And Joan told her. She said, March 30th, I looked at my charts for that month, the month of March, and I saw the 30th was going to be a bad day for your husband. Well, that convinced Nancy. Nancy thought I could have stopped it had I only known Joan and known about that unlucky or bad day. And so she began to have various telephone conversations with the astrologist, calling her twice a month. And Nancy would have before her husband's schedule for that particular month. And she would go and say, well, he's going to Chicago on May 3rd. What does May 3rd look like according to your charts? And Joan would tell her. Was it a lucky day or was it a disastrous day? And so she would even go to the point of saying and asking, well, he's got a speech to make in Chicago. When he flies out the day before the speech, should he fly in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening? That's controlled by the planets. Control the president's schedule by virtue of the day and the hours that look propitious for him to fly out. It even got so bad that it went into her consulting concerning medical issues. Is May the 14th a good day to have this procedure done for him? Is it going to be a lucky day? Or should we choose some other day? You get the picture. So what could we say in looking at this? She was a superstitious prisoner of the planets. Now, this was all kept hush-hush, of course, but eventually it did come out that the wife of the President of the United States was seeking to influence decisions of her husband based upon astrology. Well, now let's look at Haman again as he sets his plot in motion, and that's the title of our study, Haman Sets the Plot in Motion. And let's realize that we're dealing with we're seeing a very clever man. You know, when I read this, the scriptural text, the word Jew does not appear. That's who he's after. but he just says a certain people. And as we will see from ancient records, he calls them treasonous. They're not obeying your laws. They have their own law, and that's true, they do have their own law, but there's no record that they were disruptive or rioting or bringing grief to the government. And so that's a lie. But he calls them just a certain people, refraining from using the word Jew. Now, at this time, he has no idea that Esther is Jewish. But what we see here is to suggest a possible reason why he doesn't say the Jews. One reason could be that, look, this empire is far-flung, 127 different provinces. How in the world are we going to deal with these people? They're scattered all over the place. There are tens of thousands of them in the land of Israel. And then there's the whole empires from India to Ethiopia. So how are we to do this? That would be an objection that Xerxes would have. So he doesn't say Jewish people subject to genocide. But he has an ace in his sleeve, and that ace is money. That always would attract rulers, kings, presidents, prime ministers, whatever, dictators, whoever. And what he says is that if we do this, I'll guarantee you 2/3, and we get this from an ancient historian, I guarantee you 2/3 of the budget annually of the government. Wow, 2/3. I don't care hardly in what time that you live. There was one time, the administration of Andrew Jackson, but the vast 99.9% of governments never have enough money. Back in Jackson's administration, they had a surplus and they were embarrassed by it. But anyway, governments never have enough money. That would attract the attention. Now, where are they going to get this much money? Does Haman have it? 2/3 of the government's annual budget? Well, just think about what they seek to accomplish. They can confiscate the plundered Jews, the Jews that they kill. They could confiscate their property. They could confiscate their money. They could sell the land the Jews are on. And Herodotus mentions that in Susa, the capital city, many wealthy Jews remained behind and did not go back to the land. And they could have for 50 years, as we've studied, but they didn't go back. So that money's there. Oh, when we wipe them out, well, this money goes to you. And he talks about, as the narrator says in the book, these administrators, they would be the ones to receive the money, the silver, but then they would transfer it into the king's account. This would be for the king. What fallen human being can resist such an offer as that? So in looking at this text, we see that Haman has this all planned out. The best way to present it to Xerxes so that he will go for it. Well, I said earlier that we'll go back to that first verse that we read. You have to cast the lot over every month. You have to cast it over, to use our calendars, 365 separate days to find the lucky month and the lucky day. I don't know how long that took, but talk about tedious. To go through this, how much time did it take? I don't know. But to go through this day by day, month by month, that shows us something. It shows the depth of his Jew hatred. He is going to do this no matter what is involved. He is going to find the month, he is going to find the day, and then he is going to proceed. Now, God is behind the casting of the lot. This is providence as it works out, as we've studied since we began Esther 1:1. The month that the lot falls on is the last month of the year. When it's cast, it's the first month of the year. So now the Jews have a month to get ready. But this is also a double-edged sword. They have a month of dread, a month of agony, a year, not a month, a year of agony, a year of dread. Haman's coming, and we know when it's going to be. So that works out to show the extent and the depth of Jew hatred. Well, you might say, well, that was all in the past, but we have to continue to recognize that Jew hatred is the longest hatred, running hatred in the human race. And we see it in our day. For example, in some countries, the depth and extent of Jew hatred extends down into their educational systems. For example, if you were to go to some countries in the East, and you went to a class in geography and looked at the maps on the wall, there is no Israel. It's just not on the map. What is on the map is not the word Israel, but the word Palestine, or the word occupied Palestine. This is in the classrooms. But it doesn't just stop with maps on the wall. This Jew hatred has infected the textbooks of children. An 8th grade textbook used in their schools teaches reading comprehension through a violent story that promotes suicide bombers and exalts militants. In the story, the militants cut the necks of enemy soldiers and wore explosive belts, turning their bodies into fire, burning the Jewish tanks. They celebrate leaving behind some of the bodies and body parts to become food for wild animals on land and birds of prey in the sky. The children are taught the value of mob action. The children participate in mobs that try to stone the Jews or burn them to death. College students always vote for pro-terrorist parties. And they also engage, in many cases, in the most heinous acts imaginable, such as killing Jewish babies. So, putting yourself in the place of those children, this Jew hatred is taught to them in their schools every single day of their lives. Every day, every textbook, every map, every lesson to hate the Jews. Now, we might look at our Western society and think of our American presidents, Democrat or Republican. They seek to solve this through treaties, the Abraham Accords, other treaties. I can't even name them all. Other treaties to try to bring peace to that region of the world. But I don't care whether it's a Democrat president or a Republican president. If you have children being taught every single day Jew hatred, I don't care how many treaties you have. You can have all the treaties you want. But if you have generation after generation coming up and they hate the Jews through their educational system, the treaty is not going to stop it. But also we have to recognize there is a supernatural component to Jew hatred, and that is Revelation 12. That is Jew hatred. Behind it is Satan. And we'll continue our study of Haman and this plot next time.